Count tested his fiancée, saying, "I lost everything today and became poor." But what she did next. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The last waltz of the evening was already fading when Lydia Bennet realized she could no longer feel her own feet. "Do not look so solemn, my dear," Mrs. Fairfax whispered at her side, her fan tapping lightly against Lydia's wrist. "You are engaged to the most sought-after gentleman in this room. You ought to glow." "I am trying," Lydia murmured. "Perhaps I am not gifted in glowing." "Eleanor," Mrs. Fairfax called without waiting for agreement, "tell Lydia how many times Lord Ashcombe has sighed tonight about losing his chance." Miss Eleanor Fairfax glided closer, her silk skirts barely whispering. Her dark eyes sparkled as she surveyed the crowd. "3 times, Eleanor said. "And once more when you were not listening, Mamma. You should congratulate yourself, Lydia. You have broken a heart without even noticing." "I hope I have not," Lydia replied, forced to smile. "He seems far too cheerful for a broken-hearted man." Eleanor leaned in, lowering her voice. "Men can be very cheerful when money remains to comfort them." Mrs. Fairfax sighed in mild reproof. "Eleanor, do not be cruel, even in truth. Lydia is to be Lady Hawthorne. She may as well become used to admiration." Lydia's gaze drifted across the ballroom. Candlelight shimmered along polished floors. Gold glinted from frames, buttons, jewels. Men bowed, women laughed behind fans, an ocean of familiar gestures she had studied for years. She knew how to stand, how to tilt her head, how to smile without showing too many teeth. Mrs. Fairfax had trained her well. Yet sometimes amid all the music and murmurs, she heard a different sound, a distant remembered crackle of a small hearth, the wind against thin windows in a narrow Yorkshire lane, her father's voice low and weary late at night. She pushed the memory away and fixed her attention on the man crossing the room toward her. Edward Hawthorne, Earl of Hawthorne, moved with calm assurance. He did not dazzle like some men. He did not raise his voice or wave his hands. The quiet around him seemed to form of its own will. People stepped aside as he passed, not out of fear but out of habit. When his eyes found Lydia, his expression softened, just a little. It happened every time, and every time her heart answered. "Miss Bennet," he said, bowing to Mrs. Fairfax and Eleanor before turning to her. "I trust the evening has not been too long." "On the contrary," Lydia replied, curtsying. "I fear it has passed too quickly. I scarcely remember whom I have spoken to." "A sign of overwhelming admiration," Eleanor said lightly. "Or of boredom." Edward's mouth curved. "I hope it is the former." Mrs. Fairfax fluttered her fan. "You must take her to dance, my lord. It is improper that your betrothed stands idle while half the county watches." "More than half, I think," Eleanor murmured. Edward offered his arm to Lydia. "Will you oblige me?" She placed her hand upon his sleeve. The cloth was fine and firm beneath her fingers, but what she noticed more was the warmth of his skin through it. Not long ago, she would have hesitated to touch a man of such rank. Now the gesture was expected, almost ordinary. It did not feel ordinary. As they moved to the center of the room, Lydia felt the shift. Heads turned. Fans moved. A subtle hush followed them like a trailing veil. "Do you enjoy this?" Edward asked quietly, as the music began. "This? The stares, the whispers, the knowledge that you are the subject of half the conversation tonight." She laughed, but softly. "Are you certain I am so interesting?" "I am certain," he said. "Whether they wish to praise or to criticize, they cannot be indifferent." He placed his hand at her waist with respectful care. They turned with the music, steps practiced, almost effortless. Lydia kept her eyes on his face, not daring to let them wander to where she knew the glances clustered. "I try not to think of it," she answered. "When I remember that people are watching, I become clumsy. It is safer to pretend that no one sees." "Impossible," he said. "You were not made to be invisible." His tone was even, but something in his gaze troubled her. A light behind his eyes, too sharp, too attentive, as though he weighed her words. "Your mother is watching," Lydia said, seeking safer ground. "Lady Agatha has been most gracious." "Has she?" His eyes flicked toward the far end of the room. "Then I am grateful. She has high standards, as you may have observed." "She has been kind," Lydia insisted. "I do not expect more." "You ought to expect respect," he replied. "Kindness can be given to a stray dog. Respect is due to my future countess." The words should have thrilled her. They did thrill her in part, but alongside the warmth, there was a flicker of unease. Future Countess. The title rested on her like a cloak a little too heavy for her shoulders. "Tell me," Edward asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Have you regretted it yet?" "Regretted what?" "Accepting me." She almost stumbled. "No," she said at once. "No, my lord." "Edward," he corrected gently. "You may not call me that forever in public, but here, at least, allow yourself the habit." She swallowed. "No, Edward. I have not regretted it." He studied her face. "Not even when you hear them questioning your origin?" The music swelled, but his words dropped like stones into a quiet pool. "What have you heard?" she asked. "Enough." His jaw tightened. "Someone suggested to me that you must be very clever." "Clever?" She tried to smile. "That seems almost a compliment." "The sense was that you had contrived to rise beyond your station, that your gratitude to the Fairfax family had turned into ambition." Her cheeks cooled, then burned again. "And what did you answer?" "I said that those who speak with such carelessness never truly know another's heart." Relief loosened her chest. "Thank you." "Do not thank me," he replied. "I merely spoke the truth. You have never struck me as ambitious." "No?" She looked up at him, curious despite herself. "No. If you had ambition, you would flatter more." She laughed then, for real. "Is that how one must proceed? I am poorly instructed in such arts." "So I see." They turned again, nearing the edge of the floor where Lady Agatha sat among a cluster of older ladies. Her posture was perfect, her gown precise, her expression composed. She nodded once as they passed. It was not unfriendly, but it was not especially warm. "Your mother doubts me," Lydia said quietly. "She doubts everyone," Edward answered. "It is an old habit. Do not take it to heart." "It is not easy to avoid," Lydia admitted. "I am aware that compared with others in this room I come from very little. Compared with the value of your character, your origin is nothing," he said. "You are kind." "I am honest, Lydia." The use of her Christian name, without stiffness, sent a small thrill through her. She held it close as the last notes of the waltz faded. He escorted her back to Mrs. Fairfax, but she felt his hand linger for a moment longer than required. "You are pale," Mrs. Fairfax observed, examining her face. "Is the room too warm?" "Not at all," Lydia said. "I am only thinking." "That is always dangerous at a ball," Eleanor said lightly. "Do not think too much, Lydia. People will accuse you of reading serious books." "When did I ever read anything serious?" Lydia asked. "You read everything I gave you," Mrs. Fairfax interjected, "which is why you no longer curtsy as though you expect the floor to give way beneath you." Eleanor's gaze swept the room. "You have earned the right to stand straight. Suspicions or not, you are engaged to a rich man with an old title. Half the women here would gladly trade places with you." Lydia followed her look. She saw the faces, the jewels, the quick, assessing glances. Some smiled when she met their eyes. Others looked away too quickly. "You did not trade places," Lydia said quietly. Eleanor's lips curved. "Oh, my dear, I do not marry for admiration. I prefer comfort without scrutiny. But that is my taste, not yours." "You speak as if this is all a matter of choice," Lydia said. "And is it not?" Eleanor tilted her head. "When Lord Hawthorne began to visit, you could have remained distant. Instead, you grew charming. When he proposed, you said yes." Mrs. Fairfax touched Lydia's arm. "Eleanor, enough. I do not blame her," Eleanor said, still smiling. "I would simply not have the courage for such a position, to step into a house like Hawthorne's with that name, that history." "History?" Lydia asked. "We are all bound by history," Eleanor replied. "Some simply have more of it." She drifted away, leaving the words behind her like a faint trail of smoke. Later, as the guests began to depart, Lydia stood near the doors with Lady Agatha and Edward, bidding polite farewells. Cloaks were brought, carriages announced, the cold air of the winter night drifting in with each opening of the great doors. "You bore the evening well," Lady Agatha said to Lydia, when there was a brief pause. "Thank you, my lady. You did not falter even when Mrs. Davenport inquired, rather too loudly, about the exact location of your birthplace." Lydia forced a small smile. "I'm afraid there is very little to say about it. A village in Yorkshire is hardly worthy of a map." "On the contrary," Lady Agatha said. People enjoy knowing exactly from where a new countess arises. The more modest the origin, the more fascinated they become. It is human nature. I would rather they forgot, Lydia answered softly. Lady Agatha studied her. Do not be ashamed of your beginnings, Miss Bennet. Shame is only due where there has been dishonour. Yes, my lady. Her tone was neutral, yet Lydia sensed something else beneath it. Not acceptance, not entirely. A calculation, perhaps. A weighing of advantages and inconveniences. When at last the final carriage had departed and the doors were closed, the house shifted into a quieter rhythm. Servants moved more freely, gathering glasses, extinguishing lamps. Mrs. Fairfax and Eleanor prepared to leave, wrapping themselves in cloaks. "You will not stay the night?" Edward asked. "No, no," Mrs. Fairfax said. "We are but a short drive away." "Lydia, you are remaining, are you not?" "Yes," Edward answered for her. "If Miss Bennet has no objection, Mother has prepared a room." Lydia inclined her head. "I am grateful." "You must accustom yourself to it," Mrs. Fairfax said cheerfully. "Soon these rooms will be yours. Try not to rearrange them too much. Lady Agatha does not like change." "On the contrary," Lady Agatha said, with the faintest hint of a smile. "I endure it as I must." Eleanor kissed Lydia's cheek. "Sleep, if you can. Tomorrow everyone will speak of how well you bore yourself tonight. You will wake to a new rank of gossip." "I shall look forward to it," Lydia answered, attempting a light tone. When the Fairfax carriage had gone and Lady Agatha retired, Edward remained in the entrance hall. The candles were lower now, the shadows longer. Lydia stood, uncertain whether she should withdraw at once or wait for some word of dismissal. "You are tired," he said. "Yes. Will you walk for a moment before you go upstairs?" She hesitated. It was late. The house was quiet, yet he was her fiancé, and his expression was not that of a man seeking amusement. There was a tension there, like a bowstring drawn too tight. "If you wish it," she replied. He offered his arm again, but this time there was no audience to watch. They moved down a corridor lit only by a few lamps. Without the crowd, the house felt heavier, full of portraits and history she had not yet learned. He led her into a small sitting room. It was modest, compared with the grandeur outside. A low fire burned in the grate. 2 chairs stood near it, and a table with a decanter of brandy untouched. "This was my father's favourite room," Edward said, closing the door behind them. He disliked the great drawing rooms. He said they made him feel like a piece of furniture. Lydia managed a small smile. "I sympathise." She sat where he indicated. He remained standing for a moment, as though uncertain how to begin, then moved to the fireplace, resting one hand on the mantel. "Lydia," he said quietly, "may I speak to you with complete frankness?" Her stomach tightened. "Of course." "You have not known me very long." "Longer than some couples are given," she replied. "Not long enough," he said. "Yet we are engaged. Soon the law, the church, and society will tell us we belong to one another. I must be certain that we understand what that means." She folded her hands in her lap. "I am listening. Tonight," he went on, "I watched you. Do not be alarmed. I believe every man watches the woman he is to marry. I listened to what others said. I observed how you bore it." "And you were displeased?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "No," he said. "I was struck. You seemed almost calm when they spoke of your origin, almost indifferent." "I am not indifferent," she answered, "but I am accustomed to being the subject of curiosity. It began when Mrs. Fairfax took me into her house. People always wish to know from where I came. And from where do you come?" he asked quietly. "A narrow street in a forgotten village, a house that no longer belongs to us, a life of counting every coin." She looked up. "Do you wish the name of the village? I will give it. I merely doubt it will mean anything to you." "Perhaps it will mean more than you think," he replied. There was something in his tone that unsettled her. A knowledge she did not possess. A calculation. "You said you wished to speak with frankness," she prompted. "Have I done something to alarm you?" He drew a breath as if steadying himself, then turned fully to her. "Yes," he said. "Or rather, you have not done what others expected you to do, and that alarms me because it reveals how little I know of your mind." She rose, unable to remain seated under that gaze. "If I have offended—" "You have not offended," he interrupted. "You have surprised me, and I am ashamed to say that I sought that surprise. She stared at him. I do not understand. He walked toward her slowly, then stopped at a respectful distance. Earlier today, he began, before the ball, before the guests arrived, I received certain news, matters regarding the estate, investments, properties. I made a decision. She felt her heart quicken. Estate, investments. The words conjured images of ledgers, meetings, quiet conversations she had never been allowed to hear. What sort of decision? She asked. An unwise one, perhaps, he answered. But it is done. Lydia, I must tell you plainly, I have lost the greater part of my fortune. For a moment the words did not seem to belong to any language she knew. They hung in the air, heavy and slow. You have lost it? She repeated. Yes. His voice was steady, but she heard the effort. There are still legal particulars to settle, but the result is clear. The estates are encumbered, the incomes diminished. My position is not what it was yesterday. She swallowed. Do you mean completely? No, he said. The title remains. Some lands cannot be touched. But the wealth that made this house what it is, that allowed my father to live as he did, that makes men like Lord Ashcombe sigh in envy, that is gone, or very near it. He watched her closely as he spoke, as though each word were a stone tossed into her chest, and he waited to see where the ripples would reach. The room seemed to shrink. The fire crackled, distant and thin. Her first thought was of Lady Agatha, proud and upright. Her second was of Mrs. Fairfax and Eleanor, who had congratulated themselves on their generous sponsorship. Her third, sharpest and most painful, was of her father, bent over a table in a dim room, signing away the last of their security. She met Edward's eyes. When did this happen? Today, he said. This afternoon. And you chose to host a ball. I chose not to betray any anxiety until I had spoken to you, he replied. It would have been cruel to cancel the evening without explanation. Was this a speculation, she asked? A risk that failed? In part, he admitted. In part, it is a long story of mismanagement finally coming due. I will not burden you with details. What matters is the effect. I am no longer the man the world believes me to be. She moved closer to the fire without thinking, seeking warmth. What will happen? I shall adjust, he said simply. We shall all adjust. The Hawthorne name will not vanish. I am not ruined in the sense that some men are ruined, but I am no longer, as some have called me, one of the wealthiest men of my circle. I must live more modestly. I must dismiss servants. I must reorder the estates. And your mother? Lydia asked. She will be distressed, he said. She does not yet know the full extent. I wish to speak to you first. Why? He drew himself up a little, as though he stood in a court. Because you are the person most entitled to an escape, he said. The word pierced her. An escape. Yes. His voice gentled. Lydia, this engagement was formed under certain expectations. The world believes you to be betrothed to a man of great fortune. It will be hard enough for you, coming as you do from a humbler background, to step into this house under those eyes. I cannot, in honor, ask you to step into it when it has lost much of what made it desirable. She stared at him. Desirable. In their view, he said quickly. Not mine. But the world is what it is. I cannot pretend it matters nothing. Do you wish to release me from the engagement? She asked. He closed his eyes briefly. I wish to give you the choice. If you decide that you cannot marry a man who has lost his fortune, I will understand. I shall tell the world it was my fault. I shall say that I behaved badly, that you discovered some unpardonable flaw in my character. I shall bear the disgrace. She watched him, and suddenly she saw beneath the smooth words, beneath the practiced calm. There was fear there, not only fear of poverty, but fear of exposure, fear of being loved for the wrong reasons. Is this what you truly fear? She asked softly. That I love you because you are rich? He hesitated, then answered honestly. Yes, it is what I fear. And you believe that by telling me this, you will know the truth. His eyes sharpened. If you accept release, I shall know that the prospect of poverty frightened you. If you refuse it, I shall know something else. She turned away for a moment, looking into the small, stubborn fire. Poverty. The word did not frighten her. It felt too familiar for that. The coldness that spread through her was not fear of want. It was something different. the knowledge that he had weighed her heart on a scale in his mind and found it uncertain. "Have you lost everything, truly?" she asked. "Yes," he said quietly. "Everything that matters to most people here." She thought of the ladies in the ballroom, their jewels, their carefully trained smiles. She thought of Mrs. Fairfax's half-jest about admiration. She thought of Eleanor's easy talk of choice. She thought of her father's ink-stained hands, and the letter he had once crumpled in a rage she had never seen in him again. "Lydia," Edward said softly, "you owe me no loyalty yet. Our vows have not been spoken. If you say the word, I shall end this and shield you as best I can." She turned back to him. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. "You offer to protect me from shame," she said. "Yes. And who protected my father?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He blinked. "Your father?" She shook her head quickly. "It does not signify." She stepped closer. "Edward, you speak as if poverty were a calamity beyond endurance. It is not. You say that now," he answered. "You have not lived—" She cut him off, her voice low but steady. "You do not know where I have lived," she said. "You know where Mrs. Fairfax found me. You do not know what came before." He stared at her, truly seeing that there was more behind her calm than he had suspected. "I am giving you freedom, Lydia," he said. "I would not trap you in a life of diminished prospects." "You cannot free me from something I have already known," she replied. "What do you mean?" She held his gaze. Her heart beat hard, but a strange, quiet strength rose in her. "I mean," she said slowly, "that I will not break our engagement because you are less rich than yesterday. I did not say yes to your fortune. I said yes to you. If you must live more modestly, then we shall live more modestly. If you must dismiss servants, then I shall learn to do without them. I have done so before." "You would still marry me?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. "Yes. And go where? To an estate that may be half empty? To a name that may be spoken with pity instead of envy?" "Yes," she repeated. "Do you imagine that pity can wound me more than hunger? Do you imagine that gossip is sharper than the knowledge that your father could not pay the rent?" He stared, stricken. "You speak as if you have known such things," he whispered. She drew a breath. The old images rose before her, unbidden. The cold stone floor, the quiet, brave way her father had smiled when the last hope slipped away, the sound of the door closing behind the man who carried her away to a different life. "My lord," Lydia said softly, "you do not know what true loss is." "But I do." For a moment, the room was very quiet. The fire popped once in the grate. Somewhere in the house, a door closed softly. Edward did not seem to hear it. His eyes were fixed on Lydia, as if he were seeing her for the first time. "What do you mean?" he asked at last, his voice low. She almost wished she had not spoken so plainly, but the words were out now, and there was no recalling them. "I mean," she said, "that poverty is not a tale to frighten me before bed. It is a thing I remember." "You told me Mrs. Fairfax took you in," he said. "I know that you lived without luxury before coming to London, but that is not the same." "It is exactly the same," she cut in, more sharply than she intended, "only smaller. You speak of losing great incomes, fine lands. I speak of losing one narrow house and a little patch of earth. The difference is scale, not kind." He stared at her, trying to reconcile the composed young woman before him with the images her words suggested. "You should not have been left in such straits," he said. "Someone ought to have helped you." "Someone did," she replied. "Mrs. Fairfax did. Others helped too in their fashion, but help does not erase what came before it." His expression tightened. "I did not mean to belittle your past, Lydia." "No," she said, softening a little. "You did not. You only assumed that fear of losing comfort would rule me. It does not." He drew a slow breath. "Then, you truly wish to remain bound to me? Even now?" "Yes," she answered. "Unless you find you no longer wish to be bound to me." "That is not in question," he said at once. His sincerity was plain enough, yet beneath it she felt an odd disturbance. His gaze, his posture, the careful way he had framed his confession, all betrayed a hidden calculation. It was as if he were listening not only to her answer, but to the echoes it made in his own mind. "Very well," she said. "Then there is nothing more to decide. There is everything to decide, he corrected. We must consider the practical matters, your expectations, your father's comfort, your position in society. She lifted her chin. My expectations are already altered. My father's comfort has done without your fortune thus far. As for society, she smiled faintly. Society will say what it pleases, whatever we do. He could not help a brief, reluctant smile in return. You speak like a philosopher. Like a shopkeeper's daughter, she replied. We are taught early not to argue with the weather or the gossip. He studied her, then stepped closer. I am not certain you understand how severe this change may be, he said. I have been careless in certain matters. I must now be the opposite of careless if I am to repair anything. That may mean constant work, constant restraint. There will be fewer balls, fewer grand carriages, fewer visits to the shops you and Mrs. Fairfax enjoy. And more days walking on your land, she said, seeing the people who live upon it. More evenings talking instead of watching others talk. Her eyes lifted to his. If you think I will mourn the loss of endless parties, you have misread me entirely. He fell silent as though something in that answer stung and soothed him at once. You amaze me, he said quietly. I do not seek to amaze you. I only tell you the truth. Yes, he murmured, and I must learn to do the same. She frowned. You have not been truthful? His jaw tightened. I have not been entirely open with anyone. For a long time. He shook his head. It is late. I will not trouble you further tonight. Only know this. I shall not hold you to this promise forever. If, as matters unfold, you find you cannot endure the consequences, you may still withdraw. I will not think the worse of you. She felt the beginning of anger at that, small but hot. You may think as you please, she said quietly, but I will not behave like one of those women who flee at the first shadow. I say I will stay, and I will stay. He seemed about to answer, then stopped, as if the words he meant to offer were too heavy. Instead, he bowed his head. Then I am more in your debt than I can say, he replied. You are not in my debt, she said. You will soon have enough of those. He gave a short huff of breath that might almost have been a laugh. Good night, Lydia. Good night, Edward. He opened the door for her. She stepped into the darker corridor, feeling his gaze on her back until she turned the corner. Only when she reached the guest room prepared for her did she realize her hands were trembling. She slept little. When morning came, grey and thin at the edges of the curtains, she felt as if she had crossed some unseen line. The world beyond the window was the same, but nothing in her life stood where it had stood yesterday. At breakfast, Lady Agatha was composed as ever. If she knew anything of the previous day's disaster, she did not show it. Edward's face gave nothing away. Lydia watched him as he poured coffee, spoke of weather and roads and small matters, and thought of the confession in the firelit room. When she and Mrs. Fairfax returned to their own house later that morning, Lydia hoped foolishly that the world would still be ignorant. Hope lasted until the butler took their wraps. "Oh, Miss Bennet, ma'am," he said, with an eagerness that ill-suited his position. "I trust the ball was a grand success." "Quite pleasant, Mrs." Fairfax replied, removing her gloves. "No broken ankles, no collapsed chairs, no fainting, though several young men tried. That seems success enough." "Yes, ma'am," the butler said. "There is already much talk in the neighbourhood. Such a pity about Hawthorne House." Mrs. Fairfax paused. "Pity?" "Yes, ma'am. About the reversals." "I beg pardon, I thought you would have heard." Lydia felt her stomach lurch. "What reversals?" Mrs. Fairfax asked sharply. The butler paled. "I understood there had been some great loss, ma'am. Lord Hawthorne's steward said—" "Well, it is not my place." "No, it is not," Mrs. Fairfax said crisply. "You will forget at once the habit of repeating every rumour you hear below stairs." "Yes, ma'am. Of course, ma'am." But the words were already loose. Lydia knew how quickly a thing spoken in a servants' hall could climb steps and seep under drawing-room doors. Mrs. Fairfax walked into the parlour and closed the door more firmly than usual. "Eleanor," she called, "put down that wretched book and come here at once." "It is not wretched," Eleanor answered, appearing from behind the screen with a volume in hand. "It is only long. Have we been insulted by anyone new this morning?" "Worse," Mrs. Fairfax said. "The servants are talking of Hawthorne's ruin." Eleanor's brows rose. "Already? That is quick work. It has been barely 12 hours. You knew?" Lydia asked, surprised. I knew there were whispers, Eleanor said. Last night some gentleman spoke in a corner. I heard bad speculation and reckless in the same breath. I assumed they referred to Lord Ashcombe. He looks reckless. Mrs. Fairfax rounded on her. You assumed and did not tell us? I planned to ask Lydia today, Eleanor replied. Her gaze slid to Lydia. Well, is there truth to it? Lydia hesitated. She had given Edward no promise of secrecy, but his confession had felt like a thing meant for her ears alone. He told me, she said slowly, that he has lost a large portion of his fortune. Mrs. Fairfax sank into a chair. Oh, my dear. Eleanor's expression did not change much, but her eyes sharpened. And what did you say? She asked. That I do not intend to break the engagement, Lydia answered. Mrs. Fairfax made a small sound. Lydia, think carefully. I have thought, Lydia replied. Do you believe I accepted him for his wealth? No, Mrs. Fairfax said softly. I do not, but others will assume it. When they hear this, they will expect you to retreat. If you do not, they will say you cling for the sake of the name. The name was always part of the bargain, Eleanor remarked. You cannot throw it away now like an old glove. You would get nothing in return. Eleanor, Mrs. Fairfax warned. I speak plainly, Eleanor said. We must all be clear. Lydia is fond of him, I do not doubt. But there are facts. She comes from nothing. He comes even diminished from something. There is no equality in this, there never was. Lydia's hands tightened. Am I to calculate, then, to weigh his reduced fortune against my lack and decide whether the advantage is still sufficient? That is how most families proceed, Eleanor said. I am not most families, Lydia replied. Eleanor considered her. Apparently not. Very well. You will be noble. It will be beautiful. People will call you loyal, once they accept that you mean to persist. Will they? Lydia asked. I think they will call me foolish. Some will, Eleanor said. Some will call you clingingly ambitious. It is less troublesome than admitting that you might be better than they are. Mrs. Fairfax sighed. You are too sharp, Eleanor. It is not my fault that the world is dull, Eleanor answered. Now what is before us today? I promised Mrs. Davenport I would call at 3. She will want news, Mrs. Fairfax said grimly. She lives for news. Yes, Eleanor said, which is why we must call before she invents her own version. Lydia looked between them. You mean to go to her? We cannot hide, child, Mrs. Fairfax said. If we delay, it will seem as though we are ashamed. We must appear composed, informed, and entirely united with the Hawthorns. You speak as if we are planning a campaign, Lydia murmured. In a sense we are, Eleanor said. There is always a battle for the first story told. After that, it is all defense. Mrs. Fairfax rose, gathering herself. You will come with us, Lydia, you will say little. You will smile when required, you will not cry. I do not intend to cry, Lydia said. Good, Mrs. Fairfax replied. Then change your gown if you wish, but be back here in half an hour. We must look as though we slept well. The ride to Mrs. Davenport's house passed in uneasy silence. Eleanor hummed under her breath, apparently untroubled. Mrs. Fairfax watched the streets as if expecting gossip to spill from every doorway. Lydia stared out at the grey sky and thought of Edward, somewhere else in the city, perhaps facing his steward, his lawyers, his mother. She wondered if he regretted telling her first. Mrs. Davenport received them in a pretty sitting room, crowded with porcelain figures and embroidered cushions. 2 other ladies were already there, their expressions bright with curiosity. My dear Mrs. Fairfax, Mrs. Davenport exclaimed. Miss Fairfax, Miss Bennet, how delighted I am to see you. I was just saying to Mrs. Harcourt and Miss Blake that we lacked reliable information, and here you are. Reliable information is rare, Eleanor murmured, taking a seat. Lydia sat beside her, placing her hands neatly in her lap. I trust you enjoyed the ball, Mrs. Davenport continued. Such splendor. I confess, I envied you, Miss Bennet, walking into that house as its future mistress. Lydia tried to smile. It was a very beautiful evening. And the Count? Mrs. Harcourt asked. He seemed in good spirits. He bears everything with composure, Mrs. Fairfax said smoothly. Ah, Miss Blake put in. Then it is true, I suppose. There has been difficulty. Difficulties occur in every estate. Mrs. Fairfax replied. "It is the nature of property. Nothing is perfectly stable." Mrs. Davenport leaned forward. "But I heard it was more than a little difficulty. Lord Hawthorne's steward dined with my husband's cousin's household, and you know how servants talk. There was mention of heavy losses. Quite serious. I would not put too much faith in what passes between footmen and kitchen maids," Mrs. Fairfax said. "They are fond of enlarging upon any misfortune." "Still," Mrs. Harcourt said, "there is talk of mortgages. Those words do not come from thin air." Lydia felt all eyes drift toward her. Her throat was dry, but she forced herself to meet their gaze steadily. "I understand that there have been changes," she said. "Lord Hawthorne has spoken of them with great frankness. He does not hide from difficulty." Mrs. Davenport's brows climbed. "He has told you, then?" "Yes." "And yet you look quite calm," Miss Blake remarked. "I think I would be swooning." "I am not given to fainting," Lydia said. Mrs. Davenport smiled, but there was a keen edge to it. "My dear, you must forgive us. We find the situation curious. A young lady of modest origin, suddenly raised to such height, and then the height lowers itself," Eleanor said lazily. "Like a chair with a broken leg." Mrs. Davenport huffed a laugh. "Something like that. One must wonder what you will do, Miss Bennet. It is not an easy decision." Lydia's fingers curled in her skirts. "Decision? Why, whether to continue the engagement, of course," Mrs. Harcourt said. "No one would blame you if you chose to withdraw. Circumstances have altered." "On the contrary," Mrs. Davenport added with an expression of false sweetness, "some might say you would be very wise to reconsider. A young lady in your position cannot afford to be careless." "Careless," Lydia repeated sharply. "In choosing a husband who can support her," Mrs. Davenport explained. "Affection is charming, but it does not pay tradesmen." "I am aware," Lydia said. "I was raised among tradesmen." There was a slight pause. "Oh yes," Miss Blake said. "In Yorkshire, was it not? A little shop, I believe." "Yes," Lydia answered simply. "A very little shop." Mrs. Harcourt exchanged a look with Mrs. Davenport. "Then you know the hardships of such a life. You would not wish to return to it, surely." "Why not?" Lydia asked. They blinked. "Why not?" Mrs. Davenport repeated. "It was not pleasant," Lydia said. "We worked hard. There was never enough money. We worried often. But we did not lack affection. We did not lack honesty. Poverty is not a crime." "No one suggests it is a crime," Mrs. Harcourt said quickly. "Only inconvenient." "Very inconvenient," Mrs. Davenport added. "You must think of your future children, my dear. Do you wish them to grow up counting pennies?" "If I did not fear it for myself," Lydia replied, "why should I fear it for them?" "Because you have other options," Mrs. Davenport said, a little impatient now. "You are young, you are pretty, you have impressed society. There are other gentlemen who would gladly offer you a more secure future. Lord Ashcombe, for instance." "Lord Ashcombe has never expressed such an intention," Lydia said, her voice cool. "And if he did, I would refuse him." Mrs. Davenport smiled in disbelief. "Refuse?" "My dear, yes," Lydia said firmly. "I am engaged to Edward Hawthorne. I do not intend to toss him aside because his income troubles the newspapers." Mrs. Harcourt gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. "No one suggests tossing, only that it may be prudent to step back before legal ties make everything more complicated." "Everyone is very concerned for my prudence," Lydia said. "It is touching." "Lydia," Mrs. Fairfax murmured, a warning in her tone. Lydia took a breath, then let it out. "I understand your meaning, madam," she said more gently. "I know what you expect. A girl who grew up poor should cling to comfort when she finds it. She should fear losing it above all things. But that is not my fear." "And what is your fear?" Miss Blake asked, genuinely curious. "To live a life arranged by everyone's caution but my own heart's," Lydia answered. "To look back and see that I chose safety over truth." There was a silence after that. Mrs. Davenport shifted in her chair. "You speak very prettily," she said. "I only hope you will not live to regret your romance." "If I do," Lydia replied, "it will be my regret, and no one else's to manage." Eleanor made a small sound that might have been approval. "Forgive my frankness," Mrs. Harcourt said after a moment, "but do you know the full extent of Lord Hawthorne's losses? It may not be a matter of a few less balls. It may mean selling properties, dismissing half his staff, living in a manner far below what you have seen. I have seen worse, Lydia said. I do not tremble at the thought of fewer servants. You say that because you have not grown used to having them, Mrs. Davenport said. Believe me, one does not wish to return to making one's own bed. I have never forgotten how, Lydia replied. Mrs. Davenport's lips thinned. Well, time will tell. Yes, Lydia said calmly. It will. The conversation moved on after that, but the mood had shifted. The ladies still asked after gowns and dinners, but their eyes kept drifting back to Lydia, as though she were a specimen under glass. When tea was finished and the visitors began to depart, one gentleman arrived unexpectedly. He was a younger son of a minor baron, with an easy smile and a manner that always seemed to drift toward wherever the most interesting talk was. Mr. Julian Harrow, Mrs. Davenport announced. You are late. We have already eaten all the cakes. Then I'm in the proper place, he said, bowing. I have nothing to do but talk, and that is my chief talent. He greeted Mrs. Fairfax and Eleanor, then turned to Lydia. His eyes lingered on her a moment longer than courtesy required. Miss Bennet, he said warmly, all society speaks your name today. I would rather they spoke of the weather, Lydia said. That would be unkind, he replied. The weather cannot answer back. You can, Mrs. Davenport laughed. She has been answering all afternoon. She refuses to run away, Mr. Harrow. Run away? He repeated. From what? From ruin, of course, Mrs. Davenport said. But perhaps you know more than we do. Gentlemen always hear things first. Sometimes, he said. His tone shifted subtly. In this case, there is indeed talk. I am sorry, Miss Bennet. For what? She asked. That you must endure everyone's opinions, he said. Misfortune brings far more advice than comfort. That is true, Eleanor remarked. He lowered his voice slightly, addressing Lydia more directly. If ever you find the noise too great, he said, remember that there are those who would be glad to assist you, should you choose another path. The world is not so small as one engagement. Lydia gave him a level look. I did not know my path required assistance. I only mean, he said, that you are admired, Miss Bennet. Widely. Circumstances change. Affections may not. Mrs. Davenport made a small, pleased sound, as if she had arranged the speech herself. Mr. Harrow is very gallant, she said. One sees there are options. Lydia smiled politely at him. I thank you for your concern, sir, but my path is not a matter for public discussion. He inclined his head, accepting the rebuke with grace, but his eyes told her that he would not be the last to hint at other futures. When at last they left Mrs. Davenport's house, Lydia felt drained. Mrs. Fairfax spoke little as they descended the steps. Eleanor, for once, was quiet. In the carriage, Mrs. Fairfax took Lydia's hand. You behaved well, she said. Perhaps too well. You have made them curious. They will watch you more closely now. They would have watched me closely, whatever I said, Lydia replied. That is true, Eleanor agreed, but at least now they will be a little afraid of what you may say in return. Lydia managed a small, tired smile. They should be afraid, Mrs. Fairfax said fondly. You have sharper teeth than they suspect. I do not wish to bite anyone, Lydia murmured. Then do not, Eleanor said. Merely continue to speak as you did today. It is quite as painful. The carriage rolled forward. Lydia leaned her head back against the cushion, letting the rhythm of the wheels thrum through her. Her thoughts, despite everything, drifted to Edward again. She imagined him facing men far more formidable than Mrs. Davenport, signing papers, making calculations, standing before his mother. Would he approve of her defiance? Or would he wish she had been more cautious, more pliant? The question stung because she did not know. As the carriage turned onto the main street, she glanced out of the window, more from habit than interest. On the far pavement, among the passing figures, she saw a man in a worn travelling coat from Yorkshire, and her heart stopped. For a heartbeat, Lydia thought her mind was playing tricks on her. The man moved with the weary gait she remembered, shoulders slightly bent, hat pulled low. The coat was the same sort of rough wool they wore in her village, too light for London's damp chill. When he turned his head to look up at a row of houses, she saw his profile. "Stop," she said too sharply. Mrs. Fairfax looked up. "What is it?" "Please tell him to stop," Lydia repeated, leaning forward, knocking on the roof of the carriage with more force than she meant. The coachman pulled the horses up. The carriage jolted. "Lydia!" Eleanor frowned. "What?" But Lydia had already opened the door. She gathered her skirts, jumped down more clumsily than she would ever permit herself in company, and ran across the narrow street. "Papa!" she called. The man turned. For a second he looked blank, as if the noise of the city had swallowed her voice. Then his eyes widened. "Liddy?" he said. It was the name he had used when she was a child. No one in London had ever heard it. She reached him, breathless. "What are you doing here? Why did you not write?" He set down the small case he carried and took off his hat, staring at her as if she were some apparition. "I could ask you the same," he said. "Look at you, I hardly knew you. You move like a lady from a picture book." She tried to smile. "Mrs. Fairfax has been strict with me, but you did not answer me. Why are you in London?" He glanced at the carriage, at the house fronts, at the flow of strangers. "Is this a place to talk of it?" he asked. "I did not expect to be questioned in the middle of the street by my own daughter-turned-duchess." "I am not a duchess," she said. "Not anything yet. Come, Mrs. Fairfax is in the carriage. She will be glad to see you." He hesitated. His hand tightened on the handle of his case. "I am not dressed for calls," he said. "Oh, you are dressed as yourself," she replied. "That is enough." She led him back. Mrs. Fairfax had already stepped down, Eleanor behind her, both squinting through the light. "Mr. Bennet," Mrs. Fairfax exclaimed. "Well, this is unexpected." "Madam," he bowed awkwardly, "I beg your pardon for appearing like this." "Do not be foolish," she said. "You are Lydia's father. You are always welcome. You should have sent word." "I had business with a solicitor," he answered. "I thought it best to come without fuss. I did not mean to trouble you." "Nonsense," Mrs. Fairfax said briskly. "You must come home with us. We shall find you a proper room and a decent meal." "No, ma'am," he said quickly. "I could not. I am lodged at a small inn already. I do not wish to be any more in your debt than I am." "You are in no debt," she replied. "I insist." Lydia watched his jaw work. Pride, stubborn and familiar, set his features. "Let me be stubborn, Mrs. Fairfax," he said quietly. "It is almost the last thing that belongs to me. I will come to pay my respects if you will have me, but I will not occupy your house. I prefer to keep my own roof above my head, even if it leaks." Mrs. Fairfax studied him, then sighed. "As you wish," she said, "but you will dine with us tomorrow, and the next day if you remain, and the next until your business is finished. Lydia will never forgive me if I do not extract as much of your company as possible." "I shall be honored," he said with a small grateful bow. "Where are you lodged?" Lydia asked. He told her the name of a modest inn not far from the river. "You will be comfortable?" she pressed. "I have slept in worse places," he replied. His eyes softened. "Do not fret, Liddy. I did not come to London to be treated like a parcel. I came to do what must be done." "What must be done?" she repeated. He glanced at Mrs. Fairfax. "That is why I wished to speak to a solicitor first. I did not intend for you to meet me like this. You have enough to make your mind uneasy." "Enough?" Lydia asked, a chill passing through her. Mrs. Fairfax's eyes narrowed. "Is this about Hawthorne?" Mr. Bennet paused. Then he nodded. "In part," he said. Eleanor perked up. "You know of it already, then?" "I received a letter," he answered, "from a man who used to act for the Hawthornes in certain matters. He hinted that there were alterations, that I ought to come to speak in person since my family's name was attached to some old paper of theirs. I thought it better to look him in the eye." Lydia looked from her father to Mrs. Fairfax. "Old paper?" she asked. Mrs. Fairfax's hand found Lydia's arm. "This is not the street to discuss it. Mr. Bennet, we expect you tomorrow. Come at 3. If you wish, I can send a note to Hawthorne House and inform them you are in town. Lady Agatha would never forgive me if she learned I hid you." Mr. Bennet gave a short, humourless laugh. "No," he said, "best not to make an enemy of a countess." "Then it is settled," Mrs. Fairfax said. "Lydia, say goodbye properly. We are blocking the entire road." Lydia stepped closer to her father. The smells of the street, coal smoke, horses, damp wool, rose around them, strangely comforting. "You will really come," she said. "You will not change your mind." "I have changed my mind too often," he answered. "Not this time." "Go on, before that coachman runs me down with his wheels. I will see you tomorrow, Liddy." She wanted to embrace him, as she once had when she was small, but London watched through every window. She settled for squeezing his hand. It was rougher than she remembered. Back in the carriage, Eleanor watched her with interest. "You did not tell us your father was coming," she said. "I did not know," Lydia replied. "And yet he appears in the middle of a day when all of London is talking of Hawthorne's trouble," Eleanor mused. "How very timely." "Eleanor," Mrs. Fairfax said sharply, "do not start turning this into a story before we know its shape." "It has a shape already," Eleanor said. "We just cannot see the edges yet." Lydia watched her father's figure grow smaller through the window until the carriage turned and he vanished. That night, Lydia slept even less than before. Her father's presence in the city unsettled everything. The old buried line between their small ruined life and the great house of Hawthorne felt close enough to touch. The next afternoon, Mr. Bennet arrived at 3, precisely. He wore the same coat, brushed as well as it would go, and a clean frayed shirt. Mrs. Fairfax received him with proper warmth and a little extra fuss. Eleanor asked him questions about the journey, the weather in Yorkshire, the health of people whose names Lydia had not heard in years. But beneath the talk there was tension. "Have you gone to Hawthorne House?" Mrs. Fairfax asked, once tea had been poured. "Not yet," Mr. Bennet answered. "I saw the solicitor this morning. He told me enough to make me wish to see Lord Hawthorne himself before any more words are written on any paper." "Then you must go," Mrs. Fairfax said. "I can send a note if you like." "I would rather present myself," he replied. "I do not want them to think I seek favors behind letters. If they will see me, they will see me as I am." "You are too proud," Lydia said softly. "I learned it from you," he answered. There was a knock at the door. The butler entered bearing a silver tray. "A note from Hawthorne House, madam," he said to Mrs. Fairfax. Her brows lifted. "How convenient. Give it here." Eleanor leaned over as she opened it. Lydia sat very still. "It is from Lady Agatha," Mrs. Fairfax said, scanning the lines. "We are invited to dine tomorrow. A small company only. She writes that she has heard Mr. Bennet is in town and would be glad to meet him at last." Mr. Bennet gave a brief, dry smile. "She is gracious." "Did your solicitor waste no time?" Eleanor asked. "Or do the walls of London have ears as well as the servants?" "Both, I suspect," he said. "But it matters little. I wish to speak to Lord Hawthorne." "Now I shall." Lydia felt her stomach twist. A small company, Lady Agatha, Edward, Mr. Bennet, Mrs. Fairfax, Eleanor, and no doubt several other pairs of sharp eyes. "You will come, of course," Mrs. Fairfax said. "Yes," he replied. "I am tired of being a name on a ledger. I would rather be a man in a chair." The next evening, Hawthorne House seemed somehow more imposing than before. Lydia stepped from the carriage with a sense of walking into the centre of a storm, whose winds she could not see. Lady Agatha received them with impeccable grace. Her gown was simple, but faultless. The pearls at her throat gleamed like small, pale moons. "Mrs. Fairfax, Miss Fairfax, Miss Bennet, Mr. Bennet," she said, inclining her head to each in turn. "Welcome. I am pleased to have you here." "Lady Agatha," Mr. Bennet said, bowing. His voice was steady, but Lydia saw the tension in his hands. "Lord Hawthorne will join us presently," Lady Agatha said. "He is engaged in a tiresome matter with his steward, but I have reminded him that his first duty is to his guests." "I would not wish to take him from business," Mr. Bennet replied. "I know too well what happens when business is neglected." Her eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat, at that remark. "I understand you have dealings with our solicitor," she said. "I had dealings with his father," Mr. Bennet answered. "Many years ago, the son seems to have inherited the habit of letters." Lady Agatha's lips curved. "Solicitors are bred to it, I believe." They moved to the drawing room. Only a few guests were present. Mrs. Davenport and her husband, to Lydia's despair. Mr. Julian Harrow, an older gentleman introduced as Sir Henry Marsh, and a quiet, observant woman whose name Lydia did not catch at once. The talk was polite, the topics safe. Weather, Parliament, a recent concert. Beneath it all there was the sense of people waiting for someone to say the word that lay in everyone's mind. Ruin. Edward entered a little later. He looked more tired than she had ever seen him, but he carried himself with the same calm. "Mr. Bennet," he said, going to Lydia's father at once, "I am glad you have come. I have long wished to meet you properly." "And I you, my lord," Mr. Bennet replied. Though I confess in my imaginings, I did not picture this particular moment. Edward's mouth tightened. Nor did I. They spoke briefly, too briefly for Lydia's comfort. There was no time for depth. Dinner was announced. At table, Lydia found herself seated between Eleanor and Mr. Harrow, with Mrs. Davenport directly across. Mr. Bennet sat farther down, between Sir Henry and the quiet woman. At first, the talking was general. Sir Henry told a long story about a horse that had refused to jump a hedge. Mrs. Davenport laughed too loudly. Eleanor drifted in and out of the conversation with the ease of someone who never let a remark stick to her. Then, after one course, Sir Henry turned to Mr. Bennet. "You are from Yorkshire, I understand," he said. "Yes, sir," Mr. Bennet replied. "Hawthorne has property there," Sir Henry went on. "Fine land. His father acquired it on very favourable terms, if I recall." Lydia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Favourable?" Mr. Bennet repeated. "To whom?" Sir Henry chuckled, unaware of the tension. "To Hawthorne, of course. The previous owner was in some difficulty, they said. Needed ready money. The late lord was fortunate to come upon the opportunity." "Fortunate," Mr. Bennet said quietly. "Yes, that is one word for it." Lady Agatha's hand tightened around her glass. "Sir Henry," she said, "the matter of ancient land purchases is of no interest to our guests." "On the contrary," Mrs. Davenport said lightly, "I find it fascinating. I love old stories. Mr. Bennet, did you know the family who sold the land? It must have caused quite a stir, the loss of such property." "I knew them," Mr. Bennet answered. His eyes were fixed on his plate. "Very well. It caused more than a stir. It changed everything they were." Lydia's heart thudded. The table seemed suddenly too long, the candles too bright. "And did they regret it?" Mrs. Davenport asked. "One hears of such families, ruined by their own imprudence." "They were not imprudent," Mr. Bennet said, a thread of steel in his voice. "They were desperate. There is a difference." Sir Henry frowned. "Desperate in what way?" "In the way of men who have no choice," Mr. Bennet replied. "Men who sign away what they love because they owe a debt they cannot pay and cannot bear to leave unpaid." "Debts must be honoured," Sir Henry said. "Yes," Mr. Bennet said. "And sometimes the cost of that honour is borne by those who do not deserve it." There was a silence. Lady Agatha's expression had frozen. Edward watched Mr. Bennet, his brow furrowed. "I believe," Lady Agatha said, with constrained politeness, "that we may discuss more pleasant topics. Music, perhaps." "But I am curious," Mrs. Davenport persisted. "Who were these unfortunate people, Mr. Bennet? We may have heard of them." "You have not," he said flatly. "They do not matter to anyone at this table, only to themselves." Lydia's throat ached. She knew the name he would not speak. "Surely you exaggerate," Mrs. Davenport said. "Is any one family truly so small?" "Yes," he answered. "When they lose their land, their position, even their name in some cases, they become very small indeed. They are remembered only in the footnotes of some solicitor's ledger, as a line under previous owners." The quiet woman beside him spoke for the first time. "And yet they sign," she said, "knowing what they give up." "Yes," Mr. Bennet said, "because sometimes the other name on the paper is heavier than their own, because they have been helped before and feel they must repay, even if it means breaking themselves." Lady Agatha rose slightly in her chair. "This is an uncomfortable topic," she said. "I must insist we change it." Her voice carried a note that brooked no refusal. Conversation stumbled, then found other paths. The opera, a new bishop, the colours of ribbons in fashion. The moment passed, outwardly. In Lydia's chest it did not pass. It pressed, a weight she had carried for years, and had hoped might never be acknowledged in such a room. After dinner, the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, while the men remained with the port. Lydia was grateful for the separation. Her hand shook as she held her teacup. "Your father spoke very strongly," Mrs. Davenport remarked. "I did not know tradesmen cared so much for old estates." "People care about what was taken from them, whatever its size," Lydia said. "Did he know the previous owners?" Miss Blake asked. "Yes," Lydia replied. Eleanor's gaze slid to her. "He spoke as if he had been one of them." Lydia did not answer. The quiet woman, who had been introduced earlier as Mrs. Grant, regarded Lydia with steady eyes. "You seemed affected," she said gently. "I hope this talk did not revive painful memories." "Some memories never sleep long," Lydia said. Before more could be said, the men entered. Edward's eyes found her at once. There was something in his face she could not read, part concern, part calculation, part something wounded. Lady Agatha moved to a corner with Mrs. Fairfax and Mr. Bennet. Their conversation was low, intense. Lydia could not hear the words. Mr. Harrow approached, glass in hand. "Well," he said lightly. Dinner conversation took a dramatic turn. "It often does when Sir Henry tells stories," Eleanor said. "He cannot resist a ruin." "This ruin sounded very particular," Harrow replied. His gaze rested on Lydia. "It is interesting how often Hawthorne appears at the centre of such tales." "It is not interesting," Lydia said. "It is simply what happens when one has much and others have little. Gravity pulls things that way." He lifted his brows. "You speak like a philosopher again." "Or a shopkeeper's daughter," she said. Mrs. Davenport, who had drifted nearer, smiled sweetly. "We learned more about that today," she said. "I had not realized, Miss Bennet, that you once served as a companion in Mrs. Fairfax's house." Lydia's spine stiffened. "Served? Forgive me," Mrs. Davenport said. "I do not know the proper term. You were not exactly a servant, I understand, but not exactly a guest either. A sort of middle thing." Eleanor's fan snapped shut. "Who told you that?" she asked. "Oh, it is not a secret," Mrs. Davenport said. "I saw you myself years ago when I called on Mrs. Fairfax. You poured the tea with great care and left the room when we spoke of certain matters. I assumed you were a well-educated maid. I was astonished when I saw you reappear as Miss Bennet from Yorkshire, chosen by Lord Hawthorne." Lydia felt her cheeks burn. The room seemed smaller, the air thinner. "I was a companion," she said. "Mrs. Fairfax was generous enough to take me in when my father could not support me. It is not a shameful position." "Not at all," Mrs. Davenport said, with a smile that said the opposite. "Merely unusual for a future countess." Lady Agatha's head turned slightly in their direction, though she did not come closer. "I always wondered," Mrs. Davenport went on, "how you made such progress. From the parlour to the ballroom, from pouring tea to pouring grace over a title. It is a remarkable ascent." "Perhaps it was not ascent," Lydia said tightly. "Perhaps it was simply movement. People are not floors in a house for you to count." Mrs. Davenport's smile thinned. "You are very sensitive, my dear." "Perhaps you are not sensitive enough," Eleanor said coolly. "Lydia's history is no one's spectacle." "I mean no harm," Mrs. Davenport said. "I only think people should know the truth. There has been so much speculation." "The truth," Eleanor replied, "is that Mrs. Fairfax offered her house. Lydia accepted. Lord Hawthorne later offered his hand. Lydia accepted that too. Everything else is embroidery for idle fingers." "And yet," Mrs. Davenport murmured, eyes glinting, "if the Bennets once had land tied to Hawthorne, and now Miss Bennet is to marry into that very house, one cannot help but see a pattern." "A pattern only those with suspicious minds would see," Eleanor snapped. Lydia's heart hammered. The words cut close to a line she had never wanted drawn aloud. Edward came then, drawn by the raised voices. Lady Agatha followed, Mr. Bennet beside her. The currents of the evening seemed to pull them all into the same small space. "Is there some difficulty?" Edward asked. "None," Mrs. Davenport said quickly. "We were merely admiring Miss Bennet's journey." "Journey," he repeated. "From companion to countess," she said. "I confess I did not know of the first stage until tonight. It explains much." Edward's gaze shot to Lydia. "Is this true?" "Yes," Lydia said. "I lived in Mrs. Fairfax's house as a companion. I have never denied it." "You did not mention it in detail," he said quietly. "You did not ask," she replied. There was a brief, heavy silence. Lady Agatha's face was pale but composed. "I knew that Mrs. Fairfax had been of service to you," she said. "I did not understand the extent." "I am sorry if my origin offends you, my lady," Lydia said, "but I cannot make it otherwise." "It does not offend me," Lady Agatha answered. "It surprises me, as many things seem to do this evening." Mr. Bennet stepped slightly forward. "Miss Bennet has nothing to be ashamed of," he said. "If there is shame to be passed around this room, it should not fall on her." His gaze flicked, for a fraction of a second, toward Edward and Lady Agatha. Edward noticed. His brows drew together. "What do you mean by that, sir?" he asked. Nothing that must be said in a drawing-room, Mr. Bennet replied. On the contrary, Lady Agatha said sharply, if you have something to say regarding my family's honour, you will either speak plainly or not at all. My lady, he said, your family's honour was purchased dearly. That is all. Enough, Mrs. Fairfax said, alarmed. This is neither the time nor the place. It will never be the time or the place, according to those who benefited, Mr. Bennet said, his voice rising slightly. I have held my tongue for years. Perhaps that was my mistake. Lydia stepped between them. Please, she said. Papa, do not. My lord, Mr. Bennet said to Edward, ignoring her. Did your solicitor tell you whose name was on the deed before your father's? Edward's hand tightened at his side. I know only that the land was acquired from a family in distress, he said. I have asked for more particulars, but have not yet received them. Then allow me to save you the wait, Mr. Bennet said. The name was mine. Bennet, my land, my house, signed away to preserve the comfort of your father and the smoothness of his reputation. A murmur moved through the room like a sudden wind. Mrs. Davenport's eyes gleamed. Eleanor went very still. Lady Agatha's hand flew to her throat. That is not true, she said. My husband helped a man in distress long before any sale. He lent money he did not have to spare. He did, Mr. Bennet interrupted, and I was grateful. I remain grateful. That is why, when his own affairs grew tangled, I took the blame upon myself. I let the world think I was the only one careless enough to fall into debt. I signed away land that had been in my family for generations, so that his creditors would not drag his name through the mud with mine. Edward stared at him. You are saying my father's fortunes were entangled with yours, and you broke yourself to protect him? Yes, Mr. Bennet said simply. I did. I told no one, not my neighbours, not my brothers, only my daughter, and I told her to keep silent, for it would not help anyone to know. The Hawthorns would continue in honour. The Bennets would go quietly into smaller rooms. Lydia felt every eye turn to her. Is this true? Edward asked her. She swallowed. Yes. You knew. His voice was soft, disbelieving. You knew when I called? When I asked for your hand? Yes, she whispered. And you said nothing. You said nothing, she answered, her own voice rising a little. Your family took our land, Edward. You never thought to ask whose it had been. You never wondered why a man might sign away everything so quickly. You never asked what price my father paid for your father's peace. Lydia, Lady Agatha said faintly, you cannot mean to suggest that we coerced. I mean to suggest nothing, Lydia said. I mean only to say that my father did what he thought was right, and we bore the loss. I did not wish to use that loss as a chain on your affection. That is why I kept silent. I would not have you believe that I accepted you out of calculation. Edward's face was tight with conflicting emotions. Guilt, anger, confusion, something like hurt. So you accepted me knowing that my comfort had been purchased with your family's sacrifice, he said. You accepted me while holding this history in your heart, and never thought to tell me. She lifted her chin. Would you have proposed if you had known? He hesitated. The hesitation itself was an answer. Lydia laughed once, a short, bitter sound. There, she said. You see why I said nothing. This is intolerable, Lady Agatha cried softly. Our generosity has been twisted into accusation. Your engagement looks like repayment now, some contrived reparation. How will this appear to the world? My lady, Lydia said, the world has already decided what to think of me. It hardly needs facts to decorate its opinions. Edward looked between them, caught in the crossfire. I do not know what to think, he said. I feel as though every certainty I had is loosened. I believed I was giving you a new life, Lydia. Now I hear that my family took your old one. I believed our story began when I met you in Mrs. Fairfax's parlour. Now I see that it began long before, in a room I never entered. He took a step closer to her, his voice lowering. Tell me, he said, what else have you not told me? Lydia opened her mouth, the words rising, when a footman hurried into the room, pale and breathless. My lord, he said, bowing quickly, forgive the interruption, but Mr. Carter, the solicitor, has arrived. He says there is an urgent matter concerning the Hawthorn estates and an old Bennet claim that cannot wait. For a moment no one moved. The footman's words seemed to hang in the air, more solid than the furniture. Edward was the first to find his voice. "Mr. Carter is here?" he asked. "Now?" "Yes, my lord," the footman said. "He begs your immediate attention. He says the Bennet name is written in the old deeds, and must be spoken of at once." Mr. Bennet gave a short, humourless laugh. "Ah," he murmured, "at last. The ink remembers us." Lady Agatha drew herself up. "He could have waited until morning," she said, "to interrupt a gathering." "If he speaks of claims against the estate," Sir Henry interjected, "you would do well to hear him at once, Agatha. Such matters do not grow gentler overnight." Edward glanced at Lydia, then at her father. "Mr. Bennet," he said, "will you come with me? You have more right to hear whatever this man has to say than anyone." Mr. Bennet's eyes flicked to Lydia. "Do you wish it?" he asked her quietly. "Yes," she said. "If you will go, then I will go," he replied. Lady Agatha hesitated, pride warring with unease. "I shall attend as well," she said. "I will not have some clerk dictating our family's history in a back room." Edward gave a clipped nod. "Excuse us," he said to the room at large. "You will understand that this business cannot be delayed." "I hope it will not be too distressing," Mrs. Davenport murmured, with evident hopes that it would. They left. Edward, Lady Agatha, Mr. Bennet, and Sir Henry, who insisted as an old friend that he knew the estate well enough to be useful. The door closed behind them. The drawing-room felt emptier and more crowded at once. Mrs. Davenport leaned toward Mrs. Fairfax. "What an evening," she whispered. "I could not have invented better drama." "Then be grateful you did not have to," Eleanor said. "Real lives are much more expensive than your stories." Lydia stood very still. Her hands had gone cold. Mrs. Fairfax moved to her side. "Sit down," she urged. "You are pale." "I cannot sit," Lydia said. "It feels as if the floor is shifting." "Then stand," Eleanor replied. "But do not let them see you sway." Mrs. Grant, the quiet woman, came nearer. "Would you like some air?" she asked softly. "There is a smaller room just beyond this one. Fewer eyes." Lydia hesitated, then nodded. Mrs. Fairfax squeezed her arm. "Go," she said. "I will keep the vultures occupied." Eleanor's fan snapped open. "I have been training for that my entire life." Lydia followed Mrs. Grant through a side door into a smaller sitting room. A single lamp burned there. The sounds of the drawing-room became a muted hum. "You are very kind," Lydia said. "Not kind," Mrs. Grant answered. "Simply experienced. I have seen evenings like this. People forget that those at the center are not actors." Lydia sank into a chair. "My father should not have spoken so." "Perhaps," Mrs. Grant said, "but there is a limit to how long a person can be silent about the shape of their own life." "You believe him, then?" Lydia said. "I believe men do not often travel to London at such expense for a lie," Mrs. Grant replied. "And I believe you. Your face told its own story." Lydia pressed her hands together. "I never meant for Edward to hear it this way," she said. "I thought, if our life together began with this weight in the past, we could carry it quietly. I did not wish him to feel he had to atone for what was not his own doing." "And yet," Mrs. Grant said, "it seems he must know if he is to be truly your husband." "Yes," Lydia whispered. "I see that now." Mrs. Grant considered her a moment. "I do not know Lord Hawthorne well," she said, "but I have heard him spoken of as a man who tries to do what is right, even when he is clumsy about it. That counts for something." "Sometimes," Lydia said, "clumsiness can do great harm." "True," Mrs. Grant replied, "but so can silence." They waited. Minutes stretched. Voices rose and fell in the other room. Once Lydia thought she heard Lady Agatha's sharper tone pierce through, then muffle again. A servant brought tea. Lydia could not drink it. At last the door opened. Edward stood there. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear in a way she had never seen. "Mrs. Grant," he said quietly, "thank you for attending to Miss Bennet. May I speak with her alone?" "Of course," Mrs. Grant replied. She rose. "I will return to the others and try to keep them from inventing too many new sins for you." "There are enough old ones," he said, with a shadow of weary humor. When she had gone, Edward closed the door behind her. Lydia and he were alone. For a moment, neither spoke. "Well?" Lydia asked at last. "What did your solicitor say?" He moved farther into the room but did not sit. He brought the old papers, Edward said. The deed to the Yorkshire land, the notes of the loans, the letters between his father and mine, and your father's. And, she pressed. And your father spoke the truth, Edward said. My father lent money he could not spare to save another gentleman's reputation and his own. When his own affairs grew tangled, he could not repay it. The solicitor suggested arrangements. It seems your father refused to let the Hawthorne name appear in any list of debtors. He insisted that the matter be framed as his own failure alone. Lydia nodded once. That is what he told me. The documents confirm it, Edward went on. The language is careful, but the pattern is clear. Your father sold the land at far less than its value. The surplus filled the gap in my father's accounts. It kept his creditors from speaking his name with contempt. And in return, Lydia said quietly, we left our home. Yes, he replied. You left your home. And we did not ask too many questions about how convenient it was that such a property should be available at such a moment. Lydia looked at the rug. You were a child. I was old enough to see new horses in the stables, he said. Old enough to hear my parents speak of a narrow escape and to be relieved that the word bankruptcy did not follow us. I was not old enough to see whose hand had steadied the door. She glanced up at him. There was no anger in his eyes now, only pain and something like awe. Your father, she said, is not wholly to blame. Men do not choose such bargains for sport. I know, he said. He made mistakes, many. But this is not about him alone. It is about what followed. I grew into comfort built partly on your discomfort. I never noticed. I never asked. That is my shame. You cannot hold yourself responsible for every stone in a wall built before you were grown, she said. No, he replied, but I can decide what to do once I see how it was built. She said nothing. The quiet between them was not empty now. It was thick with everything they had never spoken. At least, she murmured at last, you know now. The past is less dangerous when it has a name. It has many names, he said. Bennett, Hawthorne, Carter, debt, pride, gratitude, silence. He took a step closer. Lydia, he said, my first duty tonight is to apologize. For what? She asked, though she knew. For testing you, he answered. For telling you that I had lost everything, when in truth I had not yet. Not in the way I claimed. There is risk, there are losses, but I exaggerated them cruelly to see what you would do. She felt, absurdly, a little dizzy, as if she had expected the blow, and still found it heavier than she imagined. So you are not ruined, she said slowly. No, he answered. My finances are wounded, not killed. There is work to be done, sacrifices to make. But I am not the poor man I described to you. I lied. Why? She asked, though that too she knew. It still needed saying. He looked down, then up, as if forcing himself to face her. Because I have lived my whole life in rooms like that one, he said, with a small motion toward the drawing room, surrounded by people who count value in coins and acres and names. Even kindness is measured by how much one can afford to give. When I met you, I thought you were different. Then I began to hear the whispers. Your origin, your gratitude, your cleverness in attaching yourself to a title. It gnawed at me. I began to wonder if perhaps even you, he faltered, if even I, she said quietly, had chosen you for your fortune. Yes, he forced out. I am ashamed of it, but I feared it. I have been betrayed once before by someone who admired my prospects more than my person. I did not bear it well. I did not wish to risk it again. So you decided to make me prove myself, she said. Yes, he answered. I decided to tell you I had lost everything, to see whether you would stay. And when I said I would, she asked, were you pleased? I was relieved, he said, moved, astonished, and at the same time stung by the knowledge that I had doubted you, that I had needed such proof at all. You might have ended it then, she said. You might have told me that very night that it was a test, a foolish, wicked one, and that you were sorry. I should have, he replied. Instead, I let the lie breathe. I watched you walk into drawing rooms where everyone had heard some version of it. I watched you face their questions. I told myself I needed to see if you would stand by me not only in private, but in public. I told myself I would confess soon. I kept moving that soon further away. He ran a hand over his face. I did not expect your father to appear, he said. I did not expect old deeds to rise. My simple, cruel little test has been swallowed by a truth much larger than I imagined, and now the person I most feared to lose has every reason to despise me." She studied him. His shoulders were not set as they usually were. He looked less like a count and more like a man clinging to plain words. "Do you believe I despise you?" she asked. "Perhaps you should," he said. "I have been arrogant and cowardly. I played with your peace of mind because I could not bear the thought of being deceived. And all the while, you carried a secret that might have given you every excuse to resent me, and you used it only to protect my family's honor." "That was my father's wish," she said. "He believed your father worthy of that protection." "And you?" he asked. "What did you believe?" She hesitated. "I believed that if I told you at once," she said slowly, "you would feel obliged to make it right, to offer things from guilt. I did not want that. I wanted a chance at something clean." "Instead," he said bitterly, "you got me." "Instead," she replied, "I got a man who tested me as if my heart were a coin to be bitten. That is unfortunate, but it is not beyond repair." He looked at her sharply. "You think it can be repaired?" She did not answer at once. She walked a few steps away, then turned back. "I do not know," she said. "I know that trust once cracked does not fall back into place with a word. I know that I loved you believing that, whatever your faults, you would not stoop to games. Now I see that you did. I cannot pretend otherwise." He swallowed. "I understand. I also know," she continued, "that my own silence has played its part. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to protect my father. I thought I could carry this history alone. I see now that I was wrong. A marriage cannot be built on half-truths, even if they are kindly meant." "Then we are both guilty," he said. "Yes," she replied. "In different ways." He took another step toward her. "Lydia," he said quietly, "I will not ask you to forgive me tonight. That would be another form of selfishness. I will only say this. Whatever you decide, I will do what I can to right the wrong done to your family, not because I hope thereby to purchase your goodwill, but because it is simply what ought to be done." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," he said, "that I have already asked Mr. Carter to prepare documents acknowledging the terms of the old sale, the undervaluation, the circumstances. We will restore what can be restored. Perhaps not every acre. Some have been sold on, improved, tangled in other hands. But we can begin. Your father's name will no longer stand alone as the man who failed. The record will show what he did for my father. His reputation will be mended." "My father did not ask for that," she said. "No," he replied, "because he wished to spare us. It is time someone spared him." She felt her throat tighten. "And if," she said carefully, "I refuse to marry you, then I will do it still," he answered, without hesitation. "Your answer must not depend upon what I offer your family. That would only repeat the old pattern, under a more flattering light. I will make these changes even if you never speak to me again." She believed him. Something in his voice had shifted. It was no longer the tone of a man trying to arrange outcomes. It was the quieter voice of someone who had decided at last to stand where he ought, even if he stood there alone. "You would bear the gossip," she said. "The questions. People will say you have been manipulated, that my father has forced your hand, that I have played upon your guilt." "They already say such things," he replied. "If I am to be spoken ill of, I would rather it be for doing what is right than for sitting comfortably on another man's sacrifice." Silence fell again. This time it was less sharp. It felt like a space in which things might grow if given time. "You are different tonight," Lydia said. "I see more tonight," he answered. "And I am tired of being the sort of man who chooses his comfort over his conscience." He drew a breath. "As for our engagement," he said slowly, "I release you from it, not as I threatened to do before, as a trap to see how you would protest, but as a plain fact. You are free, Lydia. If you wish, I will tell the world that the fault was mine, that I deceived you, that you bore it with dignity. No one will be allowed to speak your name with contempt in my hearing." "You would bear that too?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Happily, if it buys you peace." She looked at him. The man before her was not the Edward who had stood in the firelit room, coaxing her into a test she did not know she was taking. He was smaller somehow, less polished, more human. "And what will you do," she asked, "if I say nothing? If I go away for a time to think and leave your future uncertain, I will wait, he said simply. For as long as I am able, I will make the changes that must be made. I will care for my mother, attend to the estates, mend what can be mended. If in the end you decide against me, I will grieve, and then I will go on. But I will not try to force your hand with urgency. She almost smiled. You do not fear an open question now. I fear many things, he said, but I fear more becoming again the man who set you a test and watched as you suffered through it. I would rather tremble honestly than stand firmly on false ground. She was quiet for a long moment. At least, she said at last, we speak plainly now. Yes, he replied. At last. There was a small knock. The door opened a crack. Lady Agatha appeared. Her usual composure thinned. Edward, she said, your guests grow restless. They pretend not to notice your absence, but they are not good actors. Tell them, he replied, that I have detained you, and that they must blame me. She stepped fully into the room, glancing between them. I have spoken with Mr. Bennet, she said to Lydia. He has enlightened me. It seems I owe your family more gratitude than I knew. My lady, Lydia began. Lady Agatha raised a hand. I am not a woman given to effusive apologies, she said. I leave those to playwrights. But I must say this. I misjudged you. I saw only that you came from modest circumstances, and I feared you sought elevation. I did not see that you had already spent years protecting a name that was not your own. It was my father's choice, Lydia said. Your father made a hard choice, Lady Agatha replied. You have borne its consequences with grace. I see that now. Whatever happens between you and my son, you will have my respect. Lydia's eyes stung. That word, spoken by that woman, felt heavier than many others. Thank you, my lady, she whispered. Lady Agatha inclined her head. As for this talk of releasing engagements, she added, looking at Edward, I will not interfere. I have meddled enough. But know, both of you, that I would rather call a woman my daughter who tells uncomfortable truths than one who flatters me while hiding knives. A faint, wry smile touched her lips. Lydia found herself almost laughing through her tears. Edward looked a little astonished. You surprise me, mother, he said. I surprise myself, she answered. Adversity does strange things. It has made you honest, for one. It has made me listen. Perhaps that is our small reward. She touched his arm briefly, then left them. When the door closed, Lydia turned back to Edward. You have much to do, she said. Papers to sign, guests to calm, a mother to support. Yes, he agreed. And you? I must think, she said. I must speak with my father. I must decide whether my heart is strong enough to trust again. He nodded. Will you go back to Mrs. Fairfax's? He asked. For now, she replied. And then perhaps to Yorkshire. I do not know yet. The village may have some answers I cannot find here. If you go, he said, take my good wishes with you. I know they are of little use, but they are sincere. She stepped closer, just enough that she could see the fine lines of strain at the corners of his eyes. I do not know, she said softly, what I will decide, but I am glad you know the truth now. Whatever happens, we are no longer walking in the dark. No, he said, we are not. They stood a moment longer, caught between past and future. Then Lydia drew a breath. I should return to Mrs. Fairfax, she said. If I do not, Mrs. Davenport will begin inventing a proposal in a cupboard. He almost smiled. Then go, he said. I must face the crowd I have made. She moved to the door, then paused and looked back. Edward. Yes? If you had told me the truth from the beginning, she said, about your fears, about the money, about everything, I think I would have understood. I know, he replied. I am only now learning that understanding is not so rare as I once believed. She held his gaze a heartbeat more, then opened the door and stepped out. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of faces and murmurs. Lydia heard herself answering questions, saw Mrs. Fairfax and Eleanor flanking her like careful guardians. She glimpsed her father speaking more quietly now with Sir Henry and Mrs. Grant, his anger cooled, his weariness plain. She saw Lady Agatha watching her with a gaze that held something new. Not approval, not quite, but a cautious welcome. When at last she was alone in her own chamber at Mrs. Fairfax's house, the house quiet around her, she went to the window and looked out at the faint lights of the street. London seemed both immense and very small. She thought of the little shop in Yorkshire, of her father's tired hands, of the moment she had left everything she knew to come to a house of strangers. She thought of Edward in the firelit room, telling her a lie he believed would reveal the truth. She thought of him tonight, choosing a more difficult path without asking what reward it might bring. Her life, she realized, had been shaped for years by decisions made in other rooms. A man signing away land, another accepting the bargain, a widow guarding a name, a count testing a heart. For the first time, she felt that the next decision might truly be hers. She rested her forehead against the cold glass and let out a long, steady breath, knowing that whatever choice she made, it would come from a heart that had finally been seen clearly, and that the future, for all its uncertainty, no longer frightened her as it once had. Spring came late to Yorkshire that year. Lydia noticed it first in the way the wind softened. It still slipped down the narrow lanes with a sharp edge, but there were kinder currents beneath it. The fields beyond the village were not green yet, but they had lost their winter brown. "It suits you better," Mr. Bennet said one morning, watching her tie back her bonnet before the small mirror. "This place. You breathe differently here." "I breathe more quickly," she answered. "These hills are steeper than London stairs." He smiled. "That is not what I meant." "I know," she said, "and perhaps you are right. It does suit me." They had been there nearly a month. After that last night in London, Lydia had asked Mrs. Fairfax to let her go. There had been protests, tears, promises of endless letters, but in the end, Mrs. Fairfax had agreed. "You must see with your own eyes where you began," she had said. "Only then can you decide where you wish to go." So Lydia had come back with her father to the village where people remembered her as a child in a plain frock, not as the future countess of anything. They lived in a modest house near the one they had once owned. The shop now bore another man's name over the door. The first time Lydia walked past it, she had felt a sharp pang. The second time, less. The third time, she had gone inside to buy candles and greeted the owner as a neighbor. "Has anyone written?" her father asked now, fussing with his collar. "Yes," she said. "Mrs. Fairfax writes every week. Eleanor adds commentary she believes her mother too polite to include." "And about Hawthorne," he pressed. Lydia hesitated. "There is news, but I do not know how much you wish to hear." "I came to London for that business," he said. "I will not turn my head away from it now. Tell me." She took a folded letter from the table and opened it. "This is from Mrs. Grant," she said. "She writes clearly. I trust her to give us facts, not embroidery." She scanned the page, then read aloud. "Lord Hawthorne has set Mr. Carter to work untangling the old arrangements," she read. "There is now a formal acknowledgement in the records that the sale of your father's land was made under circumstances not wholly voluntary, that the price did not reflect its true value, and that the surplus covered debts which might otherwise have endangered the Hawthorne name. Your father's honor is restored, at least on paper." Mr. Bennet's mouth twitched. "On paper is where many men live and die," he said. "Still, it is something." "There is more," Lydia said. "Lord Hawthorne insists that a portion of the income from those lands will henceforth be paid to you as a lifetime annuity in recognition of past sacrifices. He has also offered to return a small part of the original property, land that has remained in Hawthorne hands and can be parted with without injustice to current tenants. He says that if you decline, the funds will be held in trust for your grandchildren." Mr. Bennet sat down heavily. "Good Lord," he murmured, "I never asked for that." "He knows," Lydia said. "He told me he would do it whether or not we approved." Mr. Bennet took the letter from her and read the lines with his own eyes. His fingers shook slightly. "I thought he might talk big in the heat of the moment," he said. "Men do when they are ashamed. I did not expect him to follow through so quickly." "He is stubborn," Lydia said softly. "In that, you are alike." He lowered the page. "Do you think he does this for you?" he asked. "He does it because he believes it is right," she said. "Whether that belief was born in some part from his feelings for me, I cannot say. I do not think it matters." He studied her face. "And how do you feel, Liddy?" She tied the letter with the others and set it aside. "I feel," she said, "that he is finally behaving like the man I thought him to be, and that knowing he can become that man makes everything harder, not easier." Her father nodded slowly. "You still love him?" "Yes," she said, "but I am also angry with him, and with myself." You will not make a decision without both those voices being heard, he said. No, she replied. I will not. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Well, he said, it appears we may have to speak less in the abstract. The vicar told me, after morning prayers, that a carriage with Hawthorne's crest was seen on the road to the village. Her head jerked up. Today? Today, he said. He is coming. Or someone from his house. The crest does not travel without a purpose. Her heart thudded. Did you know? She asked. No, he answered. But I am not surprised. A man who has turned half his life upside down does not sit quietly once the papers are signed. She moved to the small window and looked out. The lane was empty, but in the distance, beyond the low roofs, she could see a faint dust cloud where the road turned between hedgerows. He should not have come, she whispered. Why not? Her father asked. Do you wish to never see him again? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I do not know, she admitted. Then it is time you found out, he said simply. I will not push you towards him or away, but I will not hide you either. She turned back to him. What will you do? She asked. I will put on my better coat, he said. I will offer him tea. Then I will leave you to talk. It is not a father's place to stand between two adults who must decide their lives. She reached for his hand. You have stood between me and bad weather all my life, she said. It does not feel right to ask you to step aside now. He squeezed her fingers. This is not bad weather, he said. This is a crossroads. Only you can walk it. He was right. She knew he was right. That did not make it easier. She changed her gown, smoothing the fabric with hands that refused to be steady. It was not one of her London dresses. Those felt like costumes now. This was a simple, well-made frock she might have worn before she ever knew the weight of a title. When she heard the wheels in the lane and the murmur of a stranger's voice, her breath caught. She forced herself to walk, not run, to the small parlour. Edward Hawthorne stood just inside the door. He had not brought a large retinue. One groom waited by the carriage. His travelling coat was plain, his boots dusty. Only the cut of his clothes and the way he held himself marked him as who he was. He bowed to Mr. Bennet first. Mr. Bennet, he said, thank you for receiving me. Lord Hawthorne, Mr. Bennet replied, returning the bow. My house is not much, but it is dry. It is a great deal more than some can claim, Edward said. I am grateful. Then his gaze found Lydia. For a second, everything else vanished. The room fell away. The noise of the lane faded. The months between them melted into a thin veil. Miss Bennet, he said. She remembered the first time he had greeted her with that cool courtesy in Mrs. Fairfax's parlour. Away from chandeliers and polished floors, the same words sounded different. Lord Hawthorne, she answered. He smiled faintly. Edward, he said. If you can. She hesitated, then let the name out. Edward. Mr. Bennet cleared his throat. I will fetch tea, he said. It is what one does when gentlemen arrive, I'm told. I will leave you to speak. There is no need for fuss, Edward began. There is every need for tea, Mr. Bennet said firmly. You have done enough grand things for 1 month. Drink something ordinary. He left them. Edward looked around the little room, the low ceiling, the worn hearth, the tilted shelf of books. His expression was not disdainful. It was quiet, respectful. So, Lydia said, because someone must begin, you have found your way to the smallest Bennet house. I have been looking for it all my life without knowing it, he said. She almost laughed. You have grown poetic in my absence. I have grown, he replied. Poetry may be an unfortunate side effect. She sat in the other chair. The distance between them was small and huge. Why are you here, Edward? She asked. He folded his hands. Because I could not stay away, he said. Because after doing what I could in London, I realized that the only thing left undone was speaking plainly to you. Because I am selfish enough to hope still that our story is not finished. You released me, she reminded him. I did, he said, and I meant it. You are free. I did not come to revoke that. I came to ask you for something new, not to claim what I once presumed I owned. She looked at him steadily. What have you done since I left? She asked. Mrs. Grant rights of papers and annuities, but I would hear it from you. He nodded. I have done as I promised, he said. The record has been corrected. Your father's name is linked to my father's in a more honest way now. We have set aside a portion of income for him. We have identified a parcel of land that was once his and can be returned without uprooting families who have lived there for years. It is small compared to what was lost, but it is real. And the rest? She asked. The rest cannot be undone, he said. I cannot go back 20 years and tell my father to stumble openly. I cannot give you back the childhood you might have had. All I can do is make sure that the future does not repeat the same pattern. How? She pressed. By looking more closely, he said. By not accepting convenient arrangements without asking who pays for them. By choosing to earn what I can instead of merely resting on what others gave up. I have begun to study the accounts I use to let others manage. I speak to tenants myself. I have dismissed some men who profited too cheerfully from other people's desperation. She listened, testing each word. And your mother? She asked. She is adjusting, he said. She complains that the house is quieter without so many extravagances. Then she sleeps better at night. She has even taken to visiting the poorer families on our land. Lydia's brows rose. Lady Agatha? She went once out of obligation, Edward said. Then she went again because she wished to see how people lived whose names did not appear in the court pages. She told me the other day that she has spent too much time in rooms where no one ever worried about tomorrow. She said that? Lydia asked. Yes, he replied. She also said that if I failed to make amends to you and your father, she would disown me and adopt you anyway. Despite everything, Lydia laughed. She did not, she said. She did, he insisted. My mother has discovered a taste for dramatic justice. It is alarming. The image warmed her. And you? She asked softly. What have you discovered a taste for? He met her gaze. For truth, he said. However untidy it is, and for a life in which I am loved not for the weight of my name, but for the man I am still learning to be. Silence fell, not uncomfortable, but full. Mr. Bennet returned with a tray and set it down. I made the tea strong, he said. I suspect everyone in this room needs it. Thank you, Edward said. Mr. Bennet poured, then looked between them. I will walk down to the edge of the old field, he said. I used to stand there and pretend I still owned it. It seems fitting that I should go there now. When you are done talking, Liddy, you may come find me. He picked up his hat and left again, closing the door firmly behind him. Lydia stirred sugar into her cup, though she did not taste it. You are very calm, Edward said quietly. I am not calm, she replied. I am contained. If I let everything rise at once, I think we would both drown. Then let it come one drop at a time, he said. We are not in a ballroom. No one is watching. People are always watching, she said. Even if no one is in the room, they sit in the back of my mind, asking what I will do. What do you wish to do? He asked. She set the cup down. That is the first question I have asked myself in a long time, she said. Not what is expected or what is safe, but what do I wish? It is a frightening question. He leaned forward slightly. Can you answer it? He asked. She looked at his hands, resting on his knees, the way his fingers curled as if he were holding back from reaching for her. Yes, she said at last. I can. And? He asked. She drew a breath. I wish, she said, not to live the rest of my life wondering whether I turned away from the person I loved, because I was afraid of being hurt. His shoulders lowered a fraction. And do you love me? He asked very softly. Yes, she said. I tried not to. It was very inconvenient. But I do. Emotion flashed across his face, raw and unguarded. Lydia, he began. But, she interrupted, I will not walk back into what we were before. If we marry, it must be as equals. No tests, no hidden bargains, no unspoken debts. If you fear my motives, you must speak that fear, not disguise it as some noble experiment. If I fear your arrogance, I must say so, not carry it quietly until it poisons me. I agree, he said at once, with all of it. I have had enough of pretending that love can be weighed in silence like grain. And if you disappoint me, she asked, if you fall back into old ways, then you must tell me, he said, and I must listen, and we must decide whether to mend or to break. But we will not drift in a fog again. I cannot bear it. She studied him. You speak as if you have rehearsed this, she said. I have, he admitted. In my head, every night. Usually you interrupted me in less kind ways. She smiled in spite of herself. Did I? She said. Frequently, he replied. You threw vases. You called me a coward. One night you turned into Mrs. Davenport and told me my neckcloth was crooked. She laughed outright then, the sound surprising her. Perhaps we should avoid inviting Mrs. Davenport to the wedding, she said. His eyes widened. Does that mean there will be a wedding? You have not asked, she pointed out. He pushed his chair back and rose. For a second he looked almost uncertain. Then he went down on one knee on the worn rug. Lydia Bennet, he said, will you marry me? Not as repayment of an old debt, not as the grateful bride of a rich man, not as the rescuer of a broken name, but as the woman I love, whose courage and honesty I have wounded and wish to honor all my days. Tears blurred her vision. She had thought once of this moment in London finery, in some gilded room. Here, in a small house with a crooked window, it felt far more real. Yes, she said. On those terms, yes. He let out a breath that seemed to carry months of tension away. He took her hand, kissing it with a reverence that made her heart ache. Thank you, he whispered. Do not thank me yet, she said, though she squeezed his fingers. You are marrying a shopkeeper's daughter who will scold you if you forget to eat. Good, he said, rising. I have needed someone to scold me properly for years. She swiped at her cheeks. We must tell Papa, she said, before he imagines we have killed one another in here. They found Mr. Bennet at the edge of the field he had mentioned. He stood by a broken stone wall, looking out over land that rolled gently away. Well? He asked, not turning. Well, Lydia said, if you do not object, I am going to marry Edward Hawthorne. He was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. I see, he said. And if I do object, then I will listen, she said. But I do not think it will change my heart. He turned then. His eyes were wet. I know, he said. I saw it the first time he walked into Mrs. Fairfax's parlour, and you forgot to breathe for a full half-minute. Papa, she protested. He stepped forward and took her face in his hands. I want you to be happy, Liddy, he said. Truly happy. Not comfortable only, not respectable only, happy. If this man has finally learned to deserve you, then I will not stand in your way. He looked at Edward. And you? He asked. Will you remember when you are sitting in your fine house, that you kneeled today on a floor with splinters, and that my daughter said yes with full knowledge of your flaws? I will remember every day, Edward said, and if I forget, I expect both of you to remind me. Mr. Bennet gave a small, reluctant smile. Oh, you will be reminded, he said, by two Bennets at once. God help you. In the weeks that followed, plans unfurled. There was a small ceremony in the village church first, because Lydia insisted that the place where her life began should witness this new chapter. The pews were full of faces she knew from childhood, some older, some with new lines, all shining with curiosity and pride. Mrs. Fairfax arrived in a flurry of handkerchiefs and instructions. Eleanor came with her, pretending boredom and failing. You have chosen the most inconvenient place for a wedding, Eleanor told Lydia as she adjusted her veil. My shoes are ruined. The road is an insult. You look very fine in the insult, Lydia replied. Lady Agatha came too, stepping carefully along the worn stone path, her expression more uncertain than Lydia had ever seen it in London. This church is small, she observed. It holds more honesty than some cathedrals, Mr. Bennet said. Lady Agatha inclined her head. Then it is a good place to begin. The vicar spoke simple words. Edward took Lydia's hand and looked at her as if there were no one else present. When he said his vows, his voice did not waver. When she said hers, hers did not either. Outside, as they emerged, the village children threw petals they had gathered from hedges and gardens. Someone cheered. Someone else cried. The bells rang like laughter. There was a second celebration later at Hawthorne House. This one was grander because people expected it. Lady Agatha insisted that if her son was to marry, the world should see that Hawthorne did not hide in shame. But even there, amid the polished floors and music, something was different. The rooms felt less like stages. Lydia moved through them not as a girl pretending, but as a woman who knew what walls these were and at what cost they had been built. Mrs. Davenport arrived, of course. She could not resist. My dear Lady Hawthorne, she said to Lydia, tasting the new title, How remarkable your story has been, from shop to salon to countess. It would make a novel. Then I hope the author is kind, Lydia replied. You have married a man with less fortune than when he first asked, Mrs. Davenport observed. Most ladies would call that poor timing. Most ladies, Lydia said, do not know that love does not grow with interest. Mrs. Davenport sniffed, but she smiled. Mr. Harrow bowed low. I see you have chosen your path, he said. Yes, Lydia replied. I hope you are not disappointed. On the contrary, he said, I am relieved. I should have made you miserable. You would have scolded me endlessly for my frivolity. You would have deserved it, she said. He laughed and moved away. Eleanor drifted to Lydia's side. Well, she said, you have gone and done it. I suppose I must find my own scandal now. Please do not, Lydia said. Mrs. Fairfax will expire. Oh, I would not be improper, Eleanor answered. Merely interesting. I have no talent for tragedy. I prefer to live long enough to be bored. Lydia smiled. Later, when the guests had eaten and drunk and danced, when the musicians grew hoarse and the candles burned lower, Lydia found herself on a balcony overlooking the garden. The night was soft. The air smelled faintly of earth and distant rain. Edward joined her, closing the door behind him. Are you hiding? He asked. Resting, she said. I did not know joy could be so exhausting. He came to stand beside her. Are you happy? He asked quietly. She looked at him, at the man who had once tested her with a cruel lie and now stood beside her with his heart bare. Yes, she said. Not because of the house, not because of the title, because you learned to see me and allowed me to see you. He took her hand. I cannot promise, he said, that I will never be foolish again. I am likely to make many mistakes. I know, she replied. I will make them too, but we will not hide them. That is the difference. He drew her hand to his lips. Do you regret nothing? He asked. She thought for a moment. I regret the pain, she said, but I do not regret what it taught us. Without it, we might have lived a polite, distant life. We might have smiled in public and starved in private. I would rather have walked through fire with you and come out on the other side than have never felt the heat at all. He looked at her as if the words were a gift. I love you, he said, without tests, without conditions, without fear. I love you, she answered, with all your past and all my own. He leaned closer. She raised her face to his. Their kiss was not the tentative brush of their early days, nor the desperate clasp of two people afraid of losing each other. It was steady, warm, a promise made in silence. Below them, the garden lay quiet. Beyond it, the lands that had once belonged to her father and then to his stretched into the dark, no longer a battlefield between families, but a shared ground. Come, he said softly. Our guests will miss us. Let them miss us, she replied. For a few more minutes I wish to stand exactly here and remember this feeling. What feeling? He asked. That after everything, she said, we chose each other freely. He squeezed her hand. And so we shall, every day, he said. Not because duty tells us to, but because love does. She rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the faint sounds of music and laughter behind them, and the deeper quiet ahead, knowing that the life waiting beyond this night would not be perfect or easy, but it would be theirs to build together, one honest, courageous choice at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.